Right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 51st episode of the Talks with Thompson podcast. I'm really excited to kickstart this new series with some new guests and some new topics. Today, I am talking to my friend, Steve Kandray. He is an assistant professor of business administration and marketing at Thiel College. Thanks for being here, Steve.
Glad to be here, RJ. I appreciate it. And it's really funny hearing you do that intro because it sounded like a very good podcast intro. I listen to podcasts all the time. Never been on one before. So I'm
pretty gosh.
excited. So as soon as you did it, I'm like, oh, this sounds like I'm listening to a podcast. Oh, right. We're recording a podcast. Cool.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I don't get a lot of compliments on my my intros, but I've got some renewed energy after not recording a lot of episodes for a couple semesters. So I'm excited to get back into it. And I'm so glad that this is your first podcast. I'll be gentle. And yeah, so you and I, we've got a bit of a history. We spent a lot of time in the same area and kind of left in the same sort of time span. But that place, of course, being Youngstown. So, coming from some humble beginnings there, but we didn't really cross over all that much during the 7 years I was there.
No, not so much. I remember, when I was at McConnell Marketing, I know we had a meeting with you at one point. And I know that you were at Youngstown State when I was in grad school there, when I was getting my MBA. But yeah, we didn't really cross paths as much. And you were doing some local marketing and design work. You were part of one of the Youngstown branding campaigns, right?
So I branded the city of Youngstown, and then that became like a 5-year project, and then I left, and then it wasn't on my plate anymore. But I also ran the Youngstown Design Works program, where students were creating real work for real clients. And I know we were trying to find a way for your marketing firm at the time to piece into that city of Youngstown branding.
Right.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I was going to say, that we did end up working. I don't know if it was at the same time, but I think we were looking for maybe an intersection between City of Youngstown and the Mahoning County Visitors Bureau. I think that's what the intersection was, because we ended up doing all of the travel guides. And apparently I'm in this most recent version of the travel guide. There was still some stock photo that one of my friends saw, and he was like, hey, you're in the travel guide. How did that happen? I'm like, oh, well, the firm I used to work at does the travel guide. So they had a picture of me or something, but
forever in paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, forever, right? Well, actually, I mean, a lot less. I guess print is significantly less forever than the other means of communicating on the internet nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. That is certainly true. So I'm glad you brought this up, because I want to learn more about how you got your start in the marketing industry. What brought you to it? What were your interests? And give me a little bit about your college story and your first job.
Sure. So speaking of college, it's funny because I happened to pull a hat here, which you can see. I'm sure this is an audio. Is this an audio podcast only?
Both.
Both audio. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I have my Mount Union Purple Raiders hat here, which was my undergraduate alma mater. Went to Mount Union over in Ohio. And I remember when I went to college, I knew I wanted to do something in business. I like dealing with people. And I remember my dad was actually complaining at some point. He used to work for Lennox Industries. They do heating and air conditioning. And he said, we have these product releases and it's always contingent on the marketers. Everything, it's always marketing. We always have to, he goes, if you go into business, you need to go into marketing, because marketers run the world. So when I came to college, I was like, well, I should look into this marketing thing. And I took my first marketing class with Mark McConnell, who was actually previously at Youngstown State. He taught marketing at Youngstown State, and then ended up going on to Mount Union. But I took a class with him, and I was like, oh, I really like this marketing stuff. So decided to be a marketing major there. When I was in college, I did all sorts of activities. I was in the undergraduate American Marketing Association. I was in various clubs and organizations. But yeah, I just knew that I wanted to do something with marketing. I think because I like the appeal of business, but the creativity side of marketing. And I was really fortunate because my career, a lot of people go to college and they're like, well, I didn't really use my degree, or I didn't use the specific thing that I went to school for, I mean, I would argue that everyone uses their degree because we're teaching you things like critical thinking and writing and reading. But I really got to use marketing because I ended up working in a marketing agency and now I'm teaching marketing. So I went to school for marketing, worked at a marketing agency, now I teach marketing. So, it was a lot of fun, but that was kind of I feel grateful that I was able to align everything so completely with my degree and with what I wanted to do. So I guess that's kind of my undergraduate story. I ended up going on to get my MBA at Youngstown State. Had a great experience there. And then right out of college, I was hired by, before I went to graduate school, I was hired at McConnell Marketing, which was the firm that was owned by my marketing professor at Mount Union over in Ohio. So Mark hired me out of college to work at McConnell Marketing. Went to grad school while I was there at McConnell Marketing, which was a small boutique hospitality-focused agency. And I did social media there part-time for a couple of years, and then I moved on to business development, and now I'm here. So that's sort of the 30,000-foot view, I guess.
Full circle, yeah. Was teaching always a part of the plan?
It was.
Okay.
Well, at least at some, I distinctly remember meeting with a professor at one point, and I was like, looks like a pretty cool gig. Like, I remember a meeting and he was like, I'm really busy. You guys can stop by my office. And he was like, sitting in his office, looked pretty relaxed. And I'm like, if this is really busy to a professor, then like, this seems like a pretty good job. And I come from a long line of educators too. My mom teaches at Youngstown State. One of my aunts is a high school teacher. My other aunt teaches 6th grade. So I have a lot of educators in my life, and it always seemed like a pretty fulfilling, worthwhile path. So I knew that I wanted to do something in higher ed. It was like in the possibility, and then this opportunity at Thiel came up at the right time for me.
Yeah, it's so funny how like when you get into education, it's either something that has been influenced from early on, like you said, with your family being a long line of educators, right? But there's always some kind of educational influence that kind of nudges you into that direction, because it's not for everybody. And especially if like you've got an MBA, you've got a business degree, undergraduate degree, there's plenty of money to be made elsewhere. But then, you call into that work-life balance, and suddenly the picture changes. So, well, I'm glad that you're teaching. The Academy has certainly gained a really solid talent to teach a lot of the folks coming up, as it were.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So a lot of the students that you and I both have, they're going to be graduating and looking at, agency life. They're going to be looking at in-house situations with corporations and larger companies. And can you talk a little bit about your agency experience and what you learned from that, and the positives and the negatives?
Sure. So, it's kind of funny too, because I have all of this marketing experience. I think about marketing a lot. And something else I think a lot is my wife also works in marketing and has a marketing career. So it's funny because a lot of the same experiences that we've had in agency life and at non-agency life, they kind of like mesh. So we have a lot of things to talk about. She's like, oh, this client said this, or there was this thing. I'm like, oh, I can relate to that. So it's been really funny just how much. But we both worked at small agencies at one period of time. So I was at McConnell Marketing. She was over at Pacer Studios in Beaver, and we both had similar things. And the one thing I will say that I think the thing that I like the most is that it is nice to be part of a really small team. We had a really great culture there, and working in a small agency is nice because you get to make an impact. So as opposed to being a small fish in a big pond, working in a really small agency like that, it was nice for me because I was part of strategic planning for big campaigns. I was part of running social media. I was part of coming to big pitches. So at some of the smaller agencies, the nice thing is that you do have an opportunity to try your hand at a lot of different things. I was able to go and give a presentation to a group of hoteliers in New York City. I remember being at this hotel overlooking Central Park, and I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And it was just some opportunities that I wouldn't have gotten if I had been okay, you got to work up the ladder. You're the
Right.
new guy, and those opportunities are for senior executives, and so it was nice, just the amount of influence you get. And then primarily I worked in social media, and then I went into business development. And the fun thing about that was that if I got a new client, I could visibly see the impact that had on the company. It was like, oh, look, everybody's a lot busier because I brought in that client last week, which was really cool. So it was just sort of a lot of fun. And well, obviously, like, all of the marketing helped us bring in clients, but I could feel the impact of how I impacted other people. And we all had that. And the other thing that was really interesting about the small agency perspective was the collaboration, like just being able to bounce ideas off each other, which is very different than my current role in higher ed, because a lot of time I'm just sort of by myself in my office teaching my own classes. But when I was at McCall Marketing, we were in this open floor plan, and it was like, oh, hey, can somebody give me some feedback on this? Like, do you think this is good or bad? And you just had, like, it was almost like having like an automatic focus group on different ideas and different things, which was cool. But it could, I know that some of my coworkers, they did a lot more deep work where they were like, all right, I'm typing up this thing and I'm working really hard. And sometimes you'd have to be really careful, like, okay, are they ready to take a question? Like, or do they have headphones in? And that was kind of the rule, was like, all right, if they have headphones in, don't talk to them. If they don't, maybe they can help you with this thing. So, but it was a very unique experience for me. And I think the other thing for me is that, interestingly, a lot of small agencies are typically do local small business marketing, which is what the firm that my wife worked for, they did a lot of local stuff, but we specialized in the hospitality industry. So a lot of our clients were not in our backyard, they were all over the country. So in business development, I was actually able to fly and see a bunch of different cities and go on really cool, interesting sales trips. So just some very unique opportunities for the place I was at in my life.
It also goes to show that you don't have to be based in New York City to run a very specific type of agency that can cater to clients across the country, let alone the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always funny telling my students, I'll be like, oh yeah, and we were this little firm. I was at this little firm in Canfield, Ohio, and some of our biggest clients were in Miami and New York City. And yeah, it's like, well, you don't need to be in downtown Manhattan to do the same quality of work that some of those firms would do that are on, Madison Avenue or anything like that.
Yeah, and your billables were probably more fairly priced, more accessible to more clients.
You're literally giving like the sales pitch is like, hey, we're in Canfield, so we have low overhead, so we pass that along to you. So that was kind of part of the pitch, was that, instead of being, yes, we're from a small market, but our clients aren't, and we're able to keep our overhead low, and pretty inexpensive rent at the courthouse building over there in Canfield. And yeah, but yeah, it was a good experience.
So, you talked about being in a small agency and being able to build out various skills, and not just within like the marketing discipline, but across different disciplines as well. I think that is extremely important, especially for young marketers, young designers, I'll lump them together and call them creative professionals, because I do think that marketing is an inherently creative profession. It needs to be. You're developing all these different skills across various discipline areas. What was the one atypical skill that you learned that brought you a lot of value, and then maybe one that didn't?
So one skill that I learned that certainly brought me a lot of value, that, well, I don't know if it's becoming irrelevant or if it's transferable, but it was talking to strangers on the phone.
Oh, yes.
So I spent a lot of time in business development, and the best way to get in touch with I would mostly deal with the director of sales and marketing in a hotel. The best way to get in touch with them was to call them on the phone. So learning how do I interrupt someone, first of all, because they're doing something else, and how do I very quickly deliver my value proposition and then connect with that person while you're on the phone. And I guess even if we're not using the phone as much, I think it's kind of a similar skill in that, okay, how do you just talk to strangers? I would say that's probably the biggest skill that I developed, was whether it's on Zoom, whether it's over the phone, whether it's in person, how do you talk to people you don't know and do it comfortably? And unfortunately, I think that in today's digital world, I know everyone is much more comfortable with a text message or with an email because you get time to sit back and really plan your response. But when you're on the phone live, or if you're in person live and meeting with somebody, you have to be on. So learning that skill set, I think it has served me extremely well in, I can go into a room, I can learn how to talk to people. If I have something to pitch, I can pitch it. You know, it's been very valuable to me.
If I can presume for a moment, I think one thing to add to that is once you develop that skill, I feel like it it gives you some really great improvisational skills. Like you can handle spontaneity really well. You could walk into a room, have all of your tools stripped from you and still own the room. You know what I mean? I think that what you said is absolutely so important. And especially when considering that, you know, our students, they're, for some of them, their first jobs, their first entry level jobs will be in sales. Whether they like it or not, that is true. Like if you want to get into marketing, a great way to get into those marketing jobs is by way of sales. And those jobs are much more available than just straight up marketing jobs.
And yeah, and the other thing too is that even if you don't work in sales, you're going to have to sell something at some point, whether it's your idea, whether it's you as a person, whether it's you know, yeah, like a concept that you want people to understand. I mean, you're going to have to do it all the time. So yeah, I think learning how to talk to strangers and how to be persuasive. I think all those skills were extremely. But I think that's a really good point. That, yeah, especially in marketing, a lot of everybody wants to work on the ad campaign and have these high level, you know, be it like kind of like the more strategic and creative, but it can be difficult. A lot of what you have to do in marketing is a lot of the jobs are available in sales because face-to-face sales, phone sales, these types of things work really well. But yeah, I think that's very applicable.
Yeah. So, okay, so that might have been the best thing. What is a skill that you gained that has not really panned out?
Oh man, a skill that I've gained that hasn't panned out. Oh man, that's a really interesting question. I'm trying to think of like another skill because I feel like all the skills I want to see like the use that they had. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I learned that hasn't helped me. Can you give me do you have an example of a skill you like invested in that hasn't like worked?
No, it's a trick question because it's all valuable, the good and the bad.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like I can think of like some examples that were less than ideal, but you can convert those less than ideal experiences into teachable moments for yourself. And you know, I remember I was at an agency in downtown Pittsburgh, and one of the like associate creative director and one of the accounts people took me on site to a recording session. It was a commercial for Dollar Bank, and they hired a guy across the country to do the narration. He had a nice, calm baritone, and they brought me there, and it was like a 3 to 4 hour session. And I'm a glorified intern at this point. And they set me down. They're like, you're going to sit here and only speak when you're spoken to. Oh, okay. Well, that seems kind of unusual. And then they introduced the audio engineer, whose name was Captain Ahab. I'm not kidding. That's his preferred name. And so they're doing the recordings, and I'm not really learning anything. And he stops, and then he asks the room, he's like, you guys kind of hear this thing? I don't know if I'm catching it, but like, he's asking us, and the associate creative director says something, then the accounts person says something, and then I said like, I think I heard it. He's like, who told the intern to speak? I'm like, oh, okay. So I got up and left. I'm just like, I'm not dealing with this. So I've got work to do. So I left, and those two others come back later, and they're like, you really embarrassed us in there. Like, what are you talking about? He asked us all if we heard something. Like, we told you not to talk. That's how it works. You're here for show. I'm like, what am I showing off? What are you showing off? Like, none of it made sense. And obviously that agency situation was very anarchic. It was just very dated culturally and just totally inappropriate. But that process, that whole experience was so informative as to what I did not want for myself in that agency. They later fired me because I got a job with one of their competitors.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about just, learning from experience, I mean, one of the things that I had to really cope with in sales is just failing all the time, because sales is just a game of high failure percent. You just realize, and by failure, I mean, not failing as a person, but these small failures where you just don't win a lot. There's a lot of phone calls that don't go well. Most of the phone calls, most of the interactions you make in sales are not winning phone calls, are not winning conversations. And those are very teachable. It's very much just, okay, just have a short memory, like, I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso, but there's the one episode, Coach Lasso is like, what the animal with the shortest memory? A goldfish. Be a goldfish, so be a goldfish. You can't remember the last call you were on that you didn't win. You have to be on the new one. So yeah, I mean, I had a lot. We had one pitch one time that we were very confident. We had this big pitch for this client. And I went, prepared the pitch. We had this whole pitch deck coming in. It was going to be this campaign, and we had all these planned out. And I went, our head graphic designer went, and one of the owners of the company went on this pitch, because we're like, this is going to be great. We're really going to sell this. And we sit down with the client, and we start explaining it to him, and we're giving him the pitch deck, and we're flipping through pages, and he looks at it and he's like, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. This is not anything that I wanted, and not impressed. And it was just absolutely mortified. I felt
devastating,
absolutely devastated. Just the way that and what I realized there is that it was that there was such a miscommunication of expectations. We thought the client wanted one thing, and he was expecting something totally different. And coming out of that meeting, I'm like, okay, I will never make that mistake again. I mean, I'm going to understand next time, okay, these are the expectations, and then this is what we're going to deliver, because we were just so far. It wasn't that, that the client was wrong, and it wasn't that we were wrong. It was that we had some massive miscommunication on what was expected and what was going to happen. And that was a huge teachable moment for me. Is that, all right, I'm never going to let that happen. I will know for sure what the client expects and cater our pitch to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because I was so happy that at least my boss was here, that I didn't have to explain why this went so poorly, so.
Sometimes clients, they move the goalposts and you don't even know it. And sometimes they think you said one thing, but you mean another. I mean, even just the client interaction experience can go in so many different directions, and you can't control them, because if they feel like they're being handled, like they're being controlled, then they'll disengage even faster than that.
And I think the reason that one was so difficult is that typically in our industry, so most of our clients were in the hospitality industry, and being in hospitality professionals are extremely polite and very nice. And if they're not going to work with you, they will not say, I'm not impressed. They'll say, we'll take it back to the team. We'll review it. We'll consider this. I never had just a flat out, I'm not impressed, and it just made us feel bad. So, but I mean, it happens and you deal with it all the time, but that one just stuck with me. And it was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. Well, it's those experiences that give you resilience and, strengthen your back, right? You can support more, you can sustain more damage if you need to, but it also, informs your tactics moving forward. One of the things that I am so very, very grateful for is that out of I feel like 10,000 projects that I've done across my career since 2003, I've developed this, I won't call it an intuition, but an instinct. There's an edge there that is a bit predictive, sometimes prescriptive, but every single project adds more to that foresight. And it really helps in how it informs how you interact with people. And I would say that is just one of the most critical skills, is to just sustain yourself through all of the experiences. and you'll come out better on the other side of every single one.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk a lot about in my one of my entrepreneurship classes is the concept of grit. Are you familiar with this?
Oh yes.
Grit thing? Yeah,
Yep.
I believe Angela Duckworth, if I remember correctly, is the author of that book about grit, and you know, the concept of it's not really about who's the most talented or who's the best, but it's whoever can persevere the most tend to be most successful. So
Yeah.
that always resonated with me, and you do it a lot. It's pretty much all of sales is like who's the grittiest? How gritty can you be? If you can keep coming back and keep, you know, if you can keep getting, you know, succeeding, and it's, you know, in marketing, I mean, marketing and sales, it's all the same to me, you know, it all, you know, it has to be, you have to have a lot of grit. You have to say, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And, you know, it's all about that stick to itiveness and perseverance and all that.
There's a bit of Darwinism to it, you know, survival of the fittest. And yes, absolutely. So I'm interested in learning more about, you know, you're in the classroom now, and I'm sure you're doing some really engaging things. What do you say to a student who, you know, feels like they need to be a unicorn to be competitive?
That's really interesting. You know, I haven't had that experience yet, but I think that if I had that situation, I would say I would probably reinforce this idea of grit. You know, it's really not about who is the most talented or, you know, it's about the person who is willing to put themselves in uncomfortable situations and keep going and persevere. And, you know, yeah, I think that's what I would tell them. I would say, it's not really about, I mean, first of all, I would tell them, I would say, okay, what are your differentiators? And really think about what makes you different and better. What is your sort of uniqueness about you? And I would kind of like cultivate that. But I would say, you know, you don't have to be extraordinary. You need to be you and the best version of you, and you need to persevere and keep trying. And I feel like a lot of things nowadays, and not just nowadays, but just being a good employee in general is just, okay, are you showing up on time and are you accountable? You know, it's not really about, are you a genius? It's about, okay, well, can you get it done on time, and can you show up on time, and are you accountable? So some of those nuts and bolts things that are a lot more important than the being a unicorn, as you would say, in terms of, you know, creativity or ability, you know, things like that.
It's the small stakes that take you the farthest, no doubt. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I wanted to ask you about the MBA. So right now, from my perspective, and I could be wrong, and please share your thoughts on this, but from my perspective, you know, where at some point in the pandemic, right, we're possibly past the worst of it, but we're not quite through it. The economy's starting to bounce back. More and more jobs are being created on a monthly basis, and I'm finding that a lot of employers, they need people now. They want workers now. And there are good positions out there. I'm scanning for jobs every single day. Not that I'm looking for one, mind you, but I'm looking on behalf of my students and other stakeholders. And I feel like they need people, they need good people placed now. And that's even before the MBA. So I think for a lot of business students, there's this perception that go to business school, get the undergraduate, then the next logical or obvious course is to move into the MBA. In some cases, an MS in like marketing or a very specific discipline. But these companies are like, we need you now. We don't care about your MBA. So there might be some folks that just go straight into the profession and they're not going and getting that MBA. So that's the first part. And then the second part is, I feel like every university and college in existence has an MBA program. And if you look at the whole spectrum, right, I've seen MBA programs for as little as $2,500 up to $9,000, $10,000, $15,000, all the way up to like $120,000. So, what are your thoughts on students that are thinking about an MBA, but they want to get into the industry, especially now, so seniors, right? And then what do you think that outlook on the MBA is? Is there in the future?
Wow, there was a lot in that question.
I know, I'm sorry, but I've been
So
waiting to talk to someone about this stuff.
and we did, and just full disclosure, we just launched an MBA program at Thiel. We just had our first cohort in 2020. Well, they graduated in 2021. So we have an MBA. I have my MBA, went to Youngstown State for it. It's interesting. I knew that I wanted to go into higher ed, and the opportunity for me to get my MBA was there, so it was good. So I knew for me that getting an MBA was certainly the right choice at the right time, because I knew, hey, I have this, I can go back. A couple of my friends now who are in engineering are thinking about going back to get their MBA because they're like, oh man, I'd like to kind of climb up this corporate ladder. I'd like to get that strategic viewpoint. So they're employed and they're kind of thinking about going back to school. And the hardest thing for them right now is just finding the time to do it, because they're both immersed in it. So part of the question of, does it make sense to get an MBA? Does it make sense to do it now? Does it make sense to do it later? Part of that question is, number one, what are you doing? So what does your career path look like? It's going to be individualized. Is there a chance that will you have the opportunity to go back and get it at some point if you want to get it? And then what is your current financial situation is another layer on top of that. So yeah. It's just that there's so many variables. I think the MBA is very valuable. I think that for me, it really helped me widen and understand my worldview of how business works. And kind of to get to your point of employers that need workers now, I think in a lot of scenarios, it does make sense to go get a job, and while you're at your job, go back and get an MBA early on in your career so that you can do it. I know in our program, I'm very happy with how our program is run, because each of our students who's in the program is currently working. Well, I believe if they don't have a full-time job, they're working as a graduate assistant in a field that is related to what they want to do. And our first class had a 100% job placement rate. So that was our first cohort. So we're very focused with our program on, it is about developing the career. So one of the big things with our programs, and I don't want to turn this into like a pitch about our program, because I know that wasn't the intention of the question, but one of the things with our program is that it's about having the experience while you're going to school. So you're either working full-time and coming, or if you're not working full-time, you have a graduate assistantship that you're doing. So you are gaining that experience at the same time. So I think that having that experience at the same time is important. I was working at the agency while I was going back to school. I don't know, I guess it'd be the best way. I could just frame it in terms of, I think it's important to get the value. I don't know what the clear-cut answers are. One thing I will say is that I really like the fact of the in-person networking. I know that apparently Youngstown State, where I got my MBA, is moving almost exclusively online. But going back to our question earlier, we talked about what are some of the skills that are really important, talking to strangers. And I think that I worry, but I would think that part of it, a master's level business education should really involve interacting with people in person. So I'm excited that our program is fully in person. People are presenting in front of real people there. And it's not to put down any online programs, but just, I think that those skills are really important in the business world. I know that a lot of it's done over Zoom and digitally now, but there is still a real value to talking to strangers in person and presenting in these things. So, I don't know. I don't know how to answer it. It was a very it was a big question about the value, and I know what the value was for me, and I think it's very individualized. So I guess that's the best way I can answer that.
This podcast asks the big questions.
It does.
Well, we're wrapping up on our time together, and I was hoping you could offer some parting advice, maybe some advice that you offer your graduating seniors ready to enter the field, and then also how can folks get in touch with you to learn more about you and your work, and potentially your programs.
Sure. So my advice, one of my big things of career advice I got from a book that I read when I was in grad school called "So Good They Can't Ignore You," and the whole premise of this book is that the path to doing what you want is not necessarily linear, and you're going to have jobs that you might not necessarily love. But no matter what you're doing, be so good they can't ignore you. So I think I liked working in a marketing agency. I don't know if I liked sales, but that wasn't my passion, clearly. Teaching is really my passion. Sure. But when I was there and I was doing sales, I wanted to be as good as I possibly could be. Even if I knew, this isn't my end all career is to be in sales, I knew, all right, I'm going to be so good, or I'm just going to be as good as I can be, hopefully so good they can't ignore you is the premise of the book. So whatever you're doing, if you're not in your perfect job, many of us aren't in our perfect job immediately. It takes a little bit to get there. So just do as good as you. It's not good to just be like, well, I'm going to be resentful and not try. Be good at whatever you're doing, I would say. And also, when it comes to marketing, I think marketers in today's world are really expected to be a jack of all trades. So I would say, kind of going back to our conversation earlier, we're talking about graphic design. Learn some basic graphic design skills. Be very try to be creative. Kind of understand all of these different things as a marketer. Think like a marketer, but also have some of the skills to actually be able to produce marketing materials and be able to put together a website page, learn Wix, learn the basics. So, kind of have a good breadth of knowledge and skills, I would say.
Cool. Well put. How can folks get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
All right. If anybody wants to reach out, I guess they could reach you in my school email, especially if they want to check out our MBA program, which I mentioned before. Kandray at thiel.edu. That's usually where you can get in touch with me. So Skandray at thiel.edu. Thiel spelled Thiel. So it's like high in the middle of Thiel.
Yeah, it'll get you folks if you don't know the true spelling. Well, Steve, this was great. Thank you so much for your insights and advice. We'll have to have you back on the podcast again sometime soon.
Be happy to join.
Keep doing good work up there and teaching these students the right way to do things. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, RJ.